I want to welcome everybody who's joined the webinar here at the School of Architecture at Georgia Tech. I'm Scott Marble. I'm the chair of the school, and I'm joined by a few faculty and some students, and we're just going to all go around and introduce ourselves to get started, and then we'll just start our conversation. So why don't we start on my right here?
Hi, I'm Keith Kaseman. I am an assistant professor here. I also am a coordinator of the advanced production track in concentration in the Masters of Science of Architecture. I teach design studio, and you'll hear a little bit more in a few minutes.
I'm Michael Gamble, the director of the graduate program here in the School of Architecture. I also lead one of our international efforts, and I'm in the studio every semester working on issues primarily related to housing and urban design.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Kim. I'm the associate chair here in the School of Architecture. I also direct the undergraduate program, and I'm also working on a recent initiative, Flourishing Communities Collaborative, which is about community engagement and social outreach. I teach design studios and occasionally lead independent studies.
I'm Dani Marquez. I am a second-year M.Arch student. I am started in the 3.5-year track.
I'm Emily Wirt. I'm in my final year of the 3.5-year M.Arch program.
So we're going to give you a lot of information about the school, about the city, about the context, and then after about 20-25 minutes, then just open it up for a Q&A. So if you guys are developing questions as we're speaking, feel free to just jot those down, and then we can have an open Q&A. So I thought what I would do is just start by giving you a kind of broader context for Georgia Tech and our Master of Architecture program, and give you a sense of what it's like to be at Georgia Tech. You really could not have picked a better time to decide to come into architecture. It's a thriving profession right now. We can't graduate enough students for all the jobs that are out there. A lot of great firms are come to us looking for our graduates, and so it's a great time to come into architecture. It's a very exciting time for the profession, and the opportunities for what you get after you graduate from here are just endless. And there's a lot of opportunities that you'll hear about, as we go along. Georgia Tech is in Atlanta, Georgia. For those of you who don't know that much about Atlanta, it is one of the most thriving cities in the United States. It's growing at a crazy pace. There's development and new buildings going on all over the place. And a lot of it is literally within eyesight of where I'm sitting right now. It's all happening around Georgia Tech. So, our school, the School of Architecture and the Master of Architecture program has very strong ties to the city. We engage with a lot of the activities going on in the city. We interact with city officials. We interact with developers, with architects. And so you really get a kind of firsthand experience. As you're going to school and learning about architecture, you can just look out the window and see a city evolving in real time. It's phenomenal. It's happening very fast. Within the 2 or 3.5 years that you would be here, you will see our skyline transform. It really is something, it's amazing. And to see that at the same time that you're studying architecture is really, really unique. We're also part of Georgia Tech, the Institute. And as many of you know, Georgia Tech is one of the top engineering, computing, and science schools in the world. And we're super fortunate to be in that context. And what that means is that architecture plays this really fascinating role within the Institute in that, we kind of merge technology and art. We're in between what the Institute is known for internationally, but what we bring to it is the creative side, the artistic side, but we can leverage this enormous resources that we have at the Institute to bear on some of our programs, our studios, and that happens through many, many venues. So, the city is phenomenal. It's a unique time. It's a very cool city to be in, a great music scene, a great food scene. I mean, it's a great place to be and to hang out, even after hours and when you're not in studio. And then the Institute, again, is just in a really great place. And I think architecture we're starting to elevate our profile within the Institute. A lot of students around the Institute are very curious about what we're doing, and they want to engage with us. And so it's a very unique place to be. Julie and I came in about 3.5 years ago as chair and associate chair. And I tell you, when I came here to lead the school, I was looking around at all the other schools in the United States, and I thought there are opportunities here at Georgia Tech that don't exist anywhere else. And a lot of it had to do with Atlanta, and a lot of it had to do with the context of the Institute. And a lot of it had to do with just the reputation and the resources within our school. We have a tremendously successful PhD program that really helps to kind of provide resources for the Master of Architecture program. So even while you're in the Master of Architecture program, you'll be around PhD students, PhD researchers, research labs doing work on fabrication, on digital workflows, on health and design, on high performance building. This is just kind of ambient around the school. And even while you're in an M.Arch program, even starting in the 3.5-year program, you're going to see all this happening around you. You're going to be curious. You're not going to know what it means. And then after a year or two, you're going to realize that you can plug into that. You can take advantage of it. And this is really something that I think is very unique to Georgia Tech. And it's a great school. There's a lot of exciting things happening. It's a great time to be coming into architecture, and I think you'll love it here. So I'm going to kind of hand it over to Julie to talk more about just kind of like what it's like to be here day to day.
So I want to just echo something that Scott mentioned. He talked about when we both first joined Georgia Tech 3.5 years ago. We saw many of the same things in terms of the opportunities here, how exciting it is, the students, the faculty, and we haven't been disappointed at all. It's like every day there's something very fun and challenging that's happening here in the school. So and I think the students will probably talk some more about some of the different initiatives that we've been doing, but I think one of the things that you'll find here at Georgia Tech in the School of Architecture is that we are a very close-knit community, faculty and students working side by side, the kind of studio culture, and I think maybe at some point we'll be able to pan around Hinman. We're actually in the Hinman Research Building, which will be your home for the next 2 to 3.5 years. They're laughing, so I mean that literally. We mean that literally, and I think Michael might talk a little bit more about this as well. So the students here are absolutely engaged in everything we do. And one of the things that we've put in place are opportunities and platforms where students help drive the school agenda. We have monthly meetings with students, Scott and I do, to hear about issues related to the curriculum or ideas that it might have. And it's a very open kind of exchange that happens at that level. And in fact, some of the new courses that we've offered over the past 3 years have come directly from conversations with the students. And so we're very interested in hearing and maintaining that connection. The student ambassadors, and maybe when you've explored our website a little bit, you see that we have undergraduate and graduate student ambassadors, and these are students who, and 2 of them are sitting right here, 3 of them are sitting right here. So, they're also part of our outreach too, because oftentimes you can ask questions of us about, things about the program, but sometimes you just want to hear from the students, like what's it really like to be a student at Georgia Tech. It's exciting. It's a very exciting time to be here. The studios we just are wrapping up our semester, so but we have things like a portfolio celebration day that happens every fall. It's a great time where the whole school comes together, undergraduate from freshmen all the way up to the advanced level design and research students. And it's probably my favorite time of the year to see all of us together and celebrating the work of the semester and seeing the portfolios. And then there's a competition, and the faculty jury the competition, and best portfolios are chosen from each section. End of year show that wraps up our semester in the spring. Again, another terrific opportunity to kind of showcase all the excellent work that we're doing here. Alumni come to that. I think, Scott mentioned how we are very engaged with the profession, and that includes our alumni network. The Georgia Tech alumni are phenomenal, and they're very involved in a lot of the things that we do here in the school as well. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time because I know that my time is short, so I'm going to end here and pass it over to Michael, who is the director of our M.Arch program.
And Michael, before you start, Joel has joined us. You guys scoot in just a little bit. Just introduce yourself, Joel.
Right. Hey, I'm Joel. Jassu. Not that this is the attire that students put on at Georgia Tech, but I'm very delighted to be here. I'm in the graduate program, Masters of Architecture, in the 2-year program, and so I'll be graduating here in the spring. So it's exciting. So I hope we can chat a little bit more.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joel. Great. Carmen, can you,
Ready?
let's see if this works.
All right.
And you're seeing Carmen Wagster right there. Carmen was is our events coordinator and communication director, and is responsible for doing all of the events and lectures and everything else that we do, which is a lot. I mean, we literally do so much at the school, and without Carmen, none of this would happen.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you all joining us. I wanted you to raise your hand if you've always wanted to be an architect. Right? So the first slide that we have just sort of demonstrates how we run our studios here, and you'll recognize one of the characters in this photo is Emily.
I can't see the photo.
For those of you not so familiar with architecture studio pedagogy, we spend a lot of time together in the classroom through the course of the week. We make a lot of things that you can see in this image. This is a bridge exercise that we ran, a short project, and we put a lot of things on the wall and we talk about them. And for the most part, we have a lot of fun doing it. The Master of Architecture program, I'm just referring you to some images from the website, but architecture studies at Georgia Tech position you at the very leading edge of an ongoing revolution in architectural practice. And if there's one thing that we're really super focused on here at Georgia Tech, it's the future of architectural practice, what's relevant in the field in the next 5 to 10 years, and what role does technology play in helping us advance this mission to not only make a more beautiful and humane world, but to make a well-designed and thoughtful world. And that's one thing that I would say about our master's program is we operate at a lot of different scales. So we might one semester be working on something at the scale of the block or the neighborhood, and the next semester we might move to something that's more at the scale of the district, an infrastructure problem, et cetera. And as Scott already mentioned, Atlanta is an awesome laboratory for us to pursue a lot of these diverse interests. We have students working in other cities, other locations. Joel and Dani just returned from Africa along with Keith. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our international opportunities, and we'll hear just a touch about our practicum program also. But Georgia Tech's the place. I think that if you're looking around, if you look at design intelligence rankings now, you'll see that Georgia Tech's ranked in the top 10 of 12 really relevant categories related to the future of design practice. So we tend to sell ourselves, but we'd want to just make sure you're getting a great overview. I'm going to turn it over to Keith for a minute, who's going to talk a little bit about our studio spaces and our fabrication facilities.
Yeah, so as Julie mentioned, we're sitting in Hinman Hall. It's it's quite an amazing space. It's a real pleasure to work here and to study here. We also have a digital fabrication lab, which is a 13,000 square foot industrial grade fabrication facility. But here's Hinman. We're sitting up here on this little thing we call the hammock that's floating. Can we point to it? Yeah,
right up here.
Where we're sitting right there right now. This is the only photo that exists of this place being empty because it's super charged. I don't know this place.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know where we were.
Yeah.
It's reconfigurable. It's action packed, and as Julie mentioned, this is a photo from the very recent portfolio session. And it was great to see everything. It's chock full of action, ideas, and energy.
One note on the portfolio session, we have moved to a model where we finish most of our studio production before the Thanksgiving holiday. And then we use the last 10 days of the semester in a very constructive way to produce portfolio pages of the projects that we've completed for the semester, and then we all come together to celebrate it and identify some of the very best projects, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this photo, I think it's a great photograph. It's the first time I'm seeing it. It's great because it definitely captures the spirit in the space. Everyone kind of gathered around. All the faculty, we bring in cookies. Some of us baked the cookies. Some of us bought the cookies. So
quick trip.
Yeah. So we all brought in cookies, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. But I think the portfolio culture that we put into place here is really important, because this is something where I'm going to steal your thunder here and pass it back over to you in a second. But the portfolio it's literally it's a representation of yourself, and it's a living document that you will continue to build, like starting from, even before you start here. And then when you're here, you'll continue to revisit it. And the portfolio event, as long as other events that we have related to the portfolio, helps you in that way, so that whenever you graduate, you're armed with a really solid collection of your work for future employment.
And one of the things, I'm sorry, we're starting to mix up now. One of the things, just to note, that I spend a lot of time visiting alumni and visiting firms around Atlanta and around the country. And one of the things that we're starting to hear is that all the firms are saying that the work that's coming out of Georgia Tech, represented through the portfolio, through this effort, is better than any other school. It's really starting to be noticed by firms, and that's going to get you the best job. So this is not just a busy work exercise. This is really to, as Julie says, to provide you with a way that you can go out and fulfill your dream and kind of take advantage of the opportunities that the work you do here will give you. So it's a great, we should move on, but it's a great event. We just finished doing this. That's why it's on our mind. This was like from a week ago.
Yeah.
Okay. These are some photos of drawings from my studio, very hot off the press. The wall is empty almost. So my studios, I always look at kind of projective futures, new architectural typologies. In this case, it has to do with drones and drone space and so on, some drawings, some models, but excitingly starting to feed in augmented reality into the mix using Unity Vuforia. That opens up a whole different array of possibilities, and also trying to feed that into or incorporate that into the digital fabrication lab, the DFL. Like I said, it's a large industrial quality space. We have a water jet, 5-axis mill, 3-axis mill, a KUKA robotic arm. I just wrapped up a class called Advanced Productions, where we're using augmented reality, some robotic action. And the point to that too is, I think there's a slide out of order, but so as Michael was mentioning earlier, the mix between Masters of Science students, PhDs, M.Archs, and even ambitious undergrads all come together in these classes. So for example, I teach an elective in both the spring and the fall, and everybody and the class makeup is as diverse as just outlined, and it's really exciting. I learn a lot from that mix.
Can I just jump in really quickly? So, in terms of our audience, I hear some of you may be applying to the 2-year Master of Architecture program and have prior experience and with a pre-professional degree program. Others might be interested in the 3.5 years. So you might be looking at some of the work that's coming out of Keith's studio, which is amazing, and thinking like, there is no way I can do that. Trust me, you can and you will. And I think, and I'm hoping that Emily and Dani will speak to that, because one of the things for those of you who are interested in 3.5-year program, the core studio sequence is designed specifically so that it establishes a strong foundation for you. You learn the core skills, and by the time you're transitioning from your second to the third semester, which you end up working with Keith in the digital fabrication lab, you're gaining skills like more quickly than you can almost keep up. So I want to assure those of you who are looking and saying like, oh no, I can't, I'm too nervous about this.
That's why we're here.
Don't worry about that. Yeah, that's why we're here. So anyway, I wanted to jump in with that. Okay.
Oh, I was going to point out that all of us here are embedded in the program on a sort of daily, weekly basis, but we have a number of visiting critics that come in. And Deborah Mesa, many of you may know, has a really super impressive practice. She's joined us for the next 5 years to run our Vincilette studio. She's our Vincilette chair in architectural design. So you can take a look around and find out a lot more about our Visiting Critics program. We also have the Portman Visiting Critic, and you can't use the word Atlanta architecture without including John Portman's name. So the three go hand in hand. And the Portman family has been really super generous in not only sponsoring our Visiting Critic on an annual basis, but also funding the so-called Portman Prize, which is one of the penultimate competitions in-house here in the Master of Architecture program. You can find out more about that on the website. Let's see, there's our robot. And then you want to go back and just mention a little reference on Master of Science?
No, these are where the slides are.
That's good. We're good. So I'll move on to international travel opportunities. We have a number of summer programs. We just mentioned having students in Africa. We've been running design, develop, build projects in Africa. I direct a program in Western Europe, which is focused primarily on architecture and infrastructure. It's a 60-day summer program where you have residency in Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, and London. We've got a number of study abroad opportunities through different exchange programs. And we really, one of the hopes is that students who come to Georgia Tech have an international experience. It's how we all become better global citizens, for sure. A couple of shots from international studies. We also have a really healthy lecture program. And Wednesday afternoons, around 2:30, we all gather in the auditorium, and we usually have a guest speaker. Here's Tom Main having a very poignant and sort of laid-back conversation with some of our students and faculty last year. We have a really healthy gallery and exhibition program also. So I guess part of what we're promoting here is that when you come to Georgia Tech, you're exposed to a really broad range of topics, broad range of opinions, and lots of activities that involve making things, drawing things, and talking about them. There's a few images from my studio this past semester, just to give you an example of some of the things that are produced and how we go about talking and discussing them. Here's Dani presenting her project. Dani's project, very interesting last semester because she traversed a huge gap between the sort of conceptual organization of her project all the way down to how it might be constructed. And here you can see she's using our foam cutter, our digitally driven foam cutter, to suggest how some of the stone might be cut.
Is that full scale? Or like half scale? It's big, though.
Yeah,
it's a very
pretty big.
Yeah.
And then the last two images here just speak to the diversity of our student body. And, you know, we all work hard, but we also know how to play hard every now and then, too. Yeah. So this is an image from our Beaux-Arts ball a couple of years ago. Yeah. So with that, I'll turn it over to our students.
Well, I guess I can start if you guys want, since I'm sitting in front of all of you. So again, I'm Emily. I'm in my final year of the master's program. And so I came to Georgia Tech in the 3.5-year program. So I did interior design for my undergraduate degree and worked for a handful of years, and really came back to school and was interested in architecture, initially more on the art side of things, like how Scott was talking about earlier. And I've been very pleasantly surprised as I've been here, how I've achieved what I've wanted as far as, you know, exploring architecture through an art lens, but also I think the social component of architecture is something that has really developed as I've been here. I've worked with Julie on Flourishing Communities, which she mentioned earlier, and also just the way that our coursework is set up. And they're really, like everyone's been saying, there's an incredible amount of opportunities here, be the digital fabrication lab and all the tools we have, but also just the network of all the faculty and just how many connections I have made with professionals throughout the entire country has been really great because of faculty and just other students. And it really, truly has been a great community here. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm Dani. So I'm in the second year of the 3.5-year program. Originally, I decided to come to Georgia Tech mainly for the opportunities in research within the field. Like Emily, I came from interior design, and I was kind of looking to get into more of an research and observation side of design in general, and I thought Georgia Tech offered wonderful opportunities with that, and I have not been disappointed. During my time here so far, I originally came in looking more at the health and wellness program, but have also been very pleasantly surprised to find myself gravitating more towards digital production and fabrication with Keith. Like Julie mentioned, that third course studio that you take with them just opens up so many new opportunities and doors and what you can do. That has been wonderful. Atlanta itself, kind of like Scott touched on earlier, it's just wonderful to kind of get to see a lot of the new building techniques or even just urban development that's happening here, and then kind of relate it back or even just innovate on it. We have such a great amount of faculty kind of involved within the city that you're always involved in the conversation.
I'm Joel. Like I mentioned earlier, that I'm dressed up because I serve on the Planning and Design Commission for the Institute, and so we had a meeting today. That's why I ran down here. I initially came to Georgia Tech kind of on a surprise visit. Actually, no one knew. I didn't set up an appointment, so I drove from Memphis. I did my undergraduate in Memphis in architecture. So I drove down here 6 hours, and I didn't know if I was going to meet any faculty, but I knew I wanted to go check out this school. And so I walked into Hinman, and I did not know anybody. Like, I didn't know any student, and I remember asking one of the students and say, "Who's the director for the graduate program?" And one of the students pointed and said, "That guy right there." So it was Michael Gamble. And so
I really remember your visit very well.
That's right. So I walk into his studio, and I literally stood at the edge of his studio. And I remember Michael Gamble dropping whatever he was doing, and we had like a 20-minute conversation with him. But what was very fascinating to me is that in that moment, I knew that if the head of the graduate program has such a passion for people, then this is culture. This is the very culture that is set as a standard in this place. And so we had this conversation. And what was really, really amazing to me in that conversation, Michael Gamble did not try to persuade me to come to Georgia Tech. He was very interested in who I was, what my interests are, and what my story was. So I remember leaving that conversation, I was like, this is exactly where I want to go to school. Because I know if I go to Georgia Tech, they will not admit me or send me an acceptance letter because they want to somewhat benefit from me. They are very much interested in my personal growth and my personal development. So, and one of the things you will note is if things are repeated by everybody, maybe that's actually really true. And so if you hear me repeat certain things that people have said, that's actually the culture that all of us can be able to speak to those things. So one of the reasons why on top of that I decided to come to Georgia Tech is I wanted to go to a graduate program that was going to challenge me. I wanted to go to a graduate program that is trying to push innovation and always questioning how architecture is done, how the academia is done. And so I knew that coming to a program that is very much focused on technology, but it's a whole different thing to be very interested in technology, and it's a whole different thing to actually try and figure out how to implement these technologies. And I think I personally have not gone to any school that is pushing the boundaries of trying to actually test technology on a very, very tangible thing. And you'll see a lot of places where they talk about theories of design and techniques of design, but I haven't actually seen a school that is actually taking those theories and implementing them to building prototypes, like Women in Architecture building a sculpture here on campus, right? And that is all student-led and student-run. And I think that is absolutely something that you do not want to miss out The other thing that I know, the fact that the net worth of a man are his networks. And the professional networks that you're going to get at Georgia Tech are phenomenal. I tell you, if you want to learn from the world-class faculty that are accomplished, that are pushing the boundaries, not just in Atlanta, but all over the world, Georgia Tech is the place. But when you add on that, the people who visit the school to give lectures, it's unbelievable. This semester I had an opportunity to be the one to, go meet the guests at the hotel and take them around campus before they gave a lecture. And I tell you, it was the greatest learning experience where I had a chance to meet some of these very, very respected designers across the world. And just knowing them who they are personally and seeing them give a lecture was something that I will not forget as kind of my opportunity here at campus. I know some of you have been emailing me and asking me about what is the job market like in Atlanta. I'll tell you, there are more jobs in Atlanta in the field of architecture that you can do with, right? So there's a lot of opportunity in the city of Atlanta. In fact, last year, I don't know if this was mentioned, we had a career fair. And I calculated, and there was a 1.5 chance for, essentially there were over 65 firms, and there were about 40 students that were trying to get jobs.
Yeah.
Which meant there were more firms at the career fair than students trying to get an internship over the summer.
And each firm was looking for 2 to 3 people.
That's right. And each firm was looking for 2 to 3 people. What does that say? That if you came to Atlanta and went to school here, just the job market and the reputation that Georgia Tech has, not only in our city, but across the country, is something that you will never regret in your career. So reach out to me. We didn't even get a chance to talk about what we're doing in Africa and the opportunity that we had recently to actually go to Tanzania and basically begin to reinvent a whole new typology of architecture, through drones as a medium, right? And the other program of actually doing a design build in Africa in my own community where I was born and raised is, I tell you, one of the greatest experience I would have had here at Georgia Tech. So I'm excited to see you guys. Yeah.
And reach out to the student ambassadors. I mean, on the website, there's contact information for, 12 or 15 student ambassadors. So reach out to them and just start a conversation. That's really, they're waiting to hear from you. And I think, hearing the direct experience and developing a one-on-one kind of dialogue with one of our students is really the best way to get to know the school. So make sure you do that. I think we're at the point now where we want to introduce one more person who makes everything happen here.
Yeah, that's right.
Robin. Yeah. Robin Tucker is our academic advisor, and she knows everything, can figure everything out, can work miracles, but is also the person that you'll want to reach out to if you have specific questions about transfer credits or anything having to do with the specifics of your degree. The one thing I'll say about Robin that and this is so important when you're in school. A lot of times you'll go to school and you won't be supported. Sometimes you won't know what to do, what classes you have to take, what requirements have changed. Robin is such an incredible resource and cares about students deeply and makes sure that everybody fulfills their potential here. I mean, the faculty do that, the students do that, but Robin, as the kind of academic advisor, is really key in that role. So, are we just going to open it up to kind of Q&A now, or?
I can do that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think Robin is here to answer questions for sure. Any of us are here to answer questions. So, if you want to start, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but Carmen will again.
We'll help drive
hopefully make this happen.
So some questions were submitted ahead of time, and so we can answer a few of those. If you have any questions, we invite you to, there's a chat option in your window. we invite you to submit a question there if you have any, if you think of anything that you'd like to know. To start, just looking at some questions that were sent ahead of time. One of the questions was, how much choice do students have in terms of the kinds of projects and scale that they want to work in? That might get into like this.
Michael, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you come in as a 3.5-year student, you will have 1 year of foundational studies. And most of the scale of most of the projects that you work on in the first year are pretty small, and you're doing a number of shorter exercises. So imagine skill building like playing the piano or trying to run faster. It's just developing those unique muscles that are related to design studio production. In your second year, you'll have what's known as the options platform. And in the second year, there are common themes that reach across the studios, but you have a choice of specific project and specific instructor. And then by your third year, you're really opened up to the sort of constellation of course offerings where the MS and PhD programs are overlapping with the design studios. And those are students that in that year tend to be identifying a key topic that they want to leave Georgia Tech with. So it may be digital design and fabrication, or it may be healthcare, or it might be design build or community development, or it could be high performance buildings. That's an area in which I work. So as you traverse through the program, you have more and more options to focus on those particular building programs, those particular sites that you're most interested in.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in the scale of the projects, as Michael mentioned, they do kind of grow from smaller projects in the core up to building scale, large buildings. But then you'll also have a chance at some point to do something at more of an urban scale.
Right.
So I think, that the question about options, there are a lot of options. And Joel, you might even mention that Joel had decided in one semester to take an urban design studio.
That's right.
That's also an option. We have a Master of Science in Urban Design that's directed by Ellen Dunham-Jones, one of our
1 square mile.
great faculty. And, so there's that option also. Is that what you were going to say?
No. I was going to say next question. These are good questions.
We have a question. Can you talk a little about the application process, the portfolio, and what you're looking for in a creative student who doesn't have a design or art background? I have an undergraduate degree in English.
That's perfect. That's what we're looking for.
That's terrific.
I mean, you guys can, maybe one of the students can talk about that because they came from exactly those kind of degrees.
So in my core studio track, we've had people from finance, art history, sociology, psychology, engineering, nuclear engineering, and then some subtle or slight design overlap, like interiors and sculpture and maybe some fine arts. But the array of different backgrounds was, I think, kind of the best part about the core track is that you have so many different viewpoints of people coming into design, and they're coming into it fresh. And that gives you really a kind of a blank slate, but an advantage to learn things in a different capacity that potentially you might already have some bias if you did design beforehand. And Georgia Tech has so many different avenues for you to kind of explore what part of design you even like that I don't think it's necessary to come in with the fine arts.
So how do you approach the portfolio? I think, I'm sure one of the questions is like, what do I do? I don't have any creative work. I've never designed. So how do you approach the portfolio?
So some of the classmates that I had, when we were talking about what they had brought in for portfolio, they talked a lot about, even if they didn't do design or kind of a fine arts in their degree, they might have something that can showcase that through their hobbies or personal work. So for example, a friend from finance, he had photography that he does as a hobby, and he kind of showcased that. I know someone from, I think, art history talked about how they did papers and analysis of fine arts and kind of how that showed an analytical skill component. But I think kind of just highlighting how you can show critical thinking or even just like have a compositional view through different things that aren't necessarily tied to your field or your undergraduate degree would be great.
Yeah, and writing is, I mean, if you have a English background, writing is not something that architects are particularly good at, and I think by even having an English background as a degree, actually you have a very good place, not only in school but in the profession, right? And so, how can you use that skill of maybe creative writing? That's something very important that we need all the time to sell and pitch ideas, right? And so how can you bring that forward even in your portfolio?
Yeah, because architecture is a language also. I mean, it's just, it's just how do you tell the story through the projects that you're proposing? And so I think that there are a lot of ways that I would imagine pulling from your background in English would help, adds a whole other kind of layer to how you present your work and how you might explore architecture. So I would think it would be you'd be very well suited for the 3.5-year program.
I will say this too, with regard to the application and the portfolio and your GRE scores and your GPA. Our faculty are really, really good at looking at the things that you may not say. They're good at looking at the whole package. Like if you feel like because you're an English major, maybe you don't have those creative skills that are fine-tuned to put into a portfolio, they're going to look behind the scenes at what you say in your application, the courses maybe that you selected when you were in school. Maybe you took some fine arts courses. Maybe you took creative writing. They're going to look behind the scenes, and just because you don't necessarily have stellar creative work but you feel is creative to put in a portfolio, that doesn't count you out by any means.
We have another question.
What is the process of selection for a graduate student with architecture background in terms of the competitive exams that are prerequisites and the portfolio? If what you're asking particularly is if you have an architecture background and you're trying to come into the 2-year program, or you have you're trying to come into the 3.5-year program, we do not look at those as one group. They are 2 completely separate selection committees. In other words, if you're coming in from an English background, like the last question, but you're not going to be compared and not admitted based on the fact that you haven't put architecture in your portfolio. We don't expect you to do that. The 2-year group has its own admissions committee, and the 3.5-year group has a different admissions committee. And you're only ranked against people who have like experience.
Yeah, and just in the process of selection for a graduate student. Yeah, and in terms of, say you're all in the 2-year, or you're in the 2-year group, meaning you have some architecture background. I think what the selection committee that reviews all the applications, they're looking at your design experience. They're looking at the design quality of your past work. They're looking at how you put your portfolio together. They're looking at, as Robin mentions, they're looking at a lot of things that give an indication for potential. This is a really key thing too. We're not looking for somebody to come in that's just got it all figured out. We're looking for people that have potential, and the more diverse that potential, the better. And that's why the 3.5-year program is so critical for us, because when the 3.5-year students feed into the 2-year group in the 2nd year, that's when it really gets interesting, because you got a lot of people with design backgrounds, mixing in with people from this diverse background that Dani laid out, and it makes the kind of the educational experience and the kind of exchange of knowledge so much more broad, so much more rich, and it really, in the end, by the time you get to your 3rd year, all that starts to synthesize into incredibly well-conceived and thoughtful and sophisticated architectural solutions to projects. So. Yeah.
We have another question. When and how do the research areas laid out in the website feature in the coursework? Do we have to select one focus at some point?
No, you don't. The question is, do you have to select a focus? Many students do select a focus. I'll use myself as an example. I've always been interested in housing, domesticity, issues related to people's private lives, how they live in the world, and that's something I'm still focused on. I left graduate school with that question, but I certainly picked up other things along the way. Like I still have an interest in fine art, building technology in general. So on the one hand, you're exposed to a lot of different subject areas. On the other hand, we're certainly encouraging our students to choose a path forward because in a way, it's a way that we would distinguish between undergraduate and graduate. Undergraduate, you're sort of learning how to think. You're building a repertoire of different ideas. As a graduate student, you're trying to take all of those ideas and coalesce them into something that you want to do when you leave the university.
You know, I also think I don't know if the question is, do you choose a thesis along the way as well? But also I think it's very important to shift your mindset and say that, man, my time in graduate school is going to be a time for me to explore and find new ways that I could actually bring my techniques together. And that's very exemplary from the diversity of the studios that I offered. I never thought I would be interested in anything close to drums. You know, just put it out there. But
then you met Keith.
That's right. You know, you run into faculty members that are doing very completely different things. And like Dani said, she came in with fine arts, you know, kind of, you know, as a way she would go. But then she's found that actually digital fabrication is something that is of interest. So I think, and the fact that we do design and research, I think is, to me, one of the most compelling things to answer that question is that as you design, you're researching maybe something of your particular interest and implementing it in your design studio, or something that you may not be familiar with and you find learning about it.
The other thing I would say, just in terms of the question, you can get introduced to these research areas through electives and seminars. In other words, it doesn't have to happen in a studio context. So a lot of students will just kind of test out, like Joel said, explore whether I'm interested in health and design, I'm interested in fabrication and some of the work that Keith is doing, and they'll take a seminar. And then if you really get interested in it, then you can follow it up. So there's many ways along the curriculum where you can kind of test out different research areas. And then as Michael mentioned, hopefully by the time you get to into your second year, into your third year, you've kind of really gotten interested in something. That's where you can dive deep into it. Maybe even become involved in one of the PhD research labs as an assistant, or I mean, so Dani's working with Keith and research in the DFL, the Digital Fabrication Lab. So there's ways to test different things, but then go deep into it if you really get interested.
One of the things that I tell applicants when they ask this type of question is go to the website and explore all of the MS and PhD areas, because basically our coursework in the MS programs and some of even the PhD coursework is available to M.Arch students. There are specific courses that you will have to take, but as far as your electives, you're open to explore those areas. We have many M.Arch students who choose to go to the MS programs following their M.Arch and actually specialize in one of those areas, and they may have only taken an introductory course in Keith's area, for instance, and then as they go through the program, they decide they want to do that. Like Dani is basically doing a lot of the MS coursework. So the program is very open to you in all those directions. So look at the website and explore the MS programs. The next question is, what are the scholarship opportunities for international graduate students with a background in architecture, and what are the specific requirements to have in order to be awarded a scholarship? Every applicant to our program, whether it be the 2-year program or the 3.5, whether you're international or you're U.S., is considered for the available funding that we do have. We have a few prestigious scholarships, and basically we develop a ranked list in each of those areas, the 2-year and the 3.5, and then we begin to give out our funding as we have it. There are a few specific fellowships that are open. You have to meet certain criteria, and you can certainly look online at the Graduate Studies website, and it will reference the fellowships office, and you can contact them if you feel that you may be perfect for one of those scholarships and find out how to apply. There is no additional application process for the funding that the School of Architecture is able to give. We go strictly off of your application, and on that form there will be a place for you to indicate if you're interested in outside funding. Next. Are there opportunities for students looking to apply to participate in seminars or audit classes on campus?
Yes, there are. You just have to prioritize architecture. That's my only request, is that when you come into our M.Arch program, studio is the center of our curriculum. It's our primary way of delivering course content. And we want you to be exposed to other courses for sure, but we want to prioritize architecture.
I think that's all the
that's
questions.
the last on the chat. Do you have another one there?
There was one about, yeah, I have one more.
Okay.
What academic organizations do students join that help further their architecture career?
Oh,
So,
the
yeah.
students speak to that.
So the three primary student organizations are Women in Architecture, which Dani and I are both on the executive board, AIAS, which is American Institute of Architecture Students, and NOMAS, which is National Organization of Minority Architecture Students. It's all a lot. But so, I mean, we in Women in Architecture, really, we've had a lot of incredible opportunities for, like Joel mentioned, we did a design build installation on campus, and we've had our own exhibition of student work, which we're doing again this year. We just got back from a conference at Harvard where we met with several different universities talking about equity in architecture, which was a really great experience. And this year, we've really been trying to work closely with AIS and NOMAS more, which has been very rewarding that we've been able to collaborate together. And we're going to host a portfolio workshop for students and a resume workshop for students in the spring. So yeah, that's just like a really general overview of what we've done. I don't know if you have anything to add, Dani.
So aside from kind of all of these initiatives that we've had, we've also been reaching out to the professional community through things like site visits. We've been lucky enough to have Amy Stone in our group, who has been facilitating a lot of things like site visits through her firm that she works for, but also trying to facilitate mixers with professionals or professional mentorship, which is something that we're really interested in. For the portfolio and resume review that Emily mentioned, we're trying to have professionals come in and really give their insight to a lot of the students. And kind of same thing with AIAS and NOMAS. I know they've been reaching out. NOMAS, I know, competed in a national competition this year in Chicago, and kind of made a lot of connections there.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think when you come, it's very, very important to be involved in a student organization. I mean, I served on the national board for AIS for a while, and phenomenal experience. I met people that I still reach out to, but it's very, very important to realize that the moment you graduate, there are two things that will get you a job: the people you know and your great work, and you can only do that through student organizations, where you go out to the professional world, meet people, learn from them. And that's very important. I see a lot of international students who come to Georgia Tech. They spend all their time in Hinman. They don't talk to any student organization. People come to give a lecture. They don't talk to them. And at the end of it, they're struggling, right? And the time to do that is when you're here to get involved in student organization.
Well said.
We have a question about the application process and when decisions are made. Typically, we have our decisions out by early to mid-February. So you should hear something. You'll see your status change on Georgia Tech's graduate admissions website, where you can check your application status. You will receive your decision letter by email, and you'll also be able to log into the system back to CollegeNet and look at your letter there. So look for that somewhere by mid-February. The next question is, are there any teaching and research assistantship opportunities for our incoming two-year graduate students?
Yes. Those are partly connected to the financial support that you'll get. We have a number of graduate teaching assistantships, which come with tuition waivers and a stipend, and those usually come with some teaching opportunities or some assistantships. Not always. Some of them are other types of jobs, but so that's one way to do that. The other thing that we do, and we're doing more of this, is even if you don't get one of the formal GRAs or GTAs, the graduate teaching assistantships or graduate research assistantships, we often hire students that have come here, taken a course and done really well in that course. We'll hire them just on an hourly basis to help in another course, maybe in the undergraduate program or in the early curriculum of the graduate program. So in addition to making a little money, those that might be interested in teaching get an opportunity to see what that's like. And there's quite a bit of opportunities to do that. Yeah.
Is there a balance between working in the community and the studio? Are there opportunities to work in the community?
You want to take that there?
Yeah, there are opportunities to work in the community. The typical graduate student would be limited to 12 to 15 hours a week of work. So there's also a lot of opportunities to work on campus. We have a number of our students who work in allied operations here on campus. And plus, we're right in the center of the city, Midtown Atlanta. So students who are working in firms, for the most part, have a very short commute. And that's what I would say is if you plan to work during graduate school, you want to carefully control the gap between work and school, meaning that the closer you can work to the university, the better.
I think they might also be asking about studio-centric work versus like community-based work.
Like Julie.
Yeah.
Flourishing.
I wasn't sure if that was a question.
I think, well, let's answer that too, just because.
If that was a question about community engagement. What was the question again?
Is there a balance between working in the community and studio? Are there opportunities to work in the community?
Well, I guess the way that the Flourishing Communities Collaborative has operated so far is it's run via independent studies. And so we've worked with 2 community groups so far. And it was a small group of students. The first time it was 5 students that worked closely with myself in the community group, graduate students, and then an undergraduate student. And the second one, which we're just wrapping up the semester, was 2 graduate students. One of them was Emily, working with me. So I think that we do try to strike a balance that between the engagement in the independent study. Those were 3-credit courses, so they're not a design studio. So we try to calibrate how much time is involved in those opportunities. What's great about those is it does give the students an opportunity to meet community stakeholders, to be present at meetings, to participate actively in those kinds of conversations, and that's wrapped up in kind of the learning outcomes and objectives of those courses.
And sometimes the studio can be to where, like last semester, every week I had a community meeting.
Yeah, sometimes the studios and the community work are the same thing.
Are the same thing,
I'm thinking of Stuart Rom's work with the group in Alabama, Herman's group. Yeah, so again, it goes to the options that you will have when you select a studio.
Yeah.
If you're really interested in community-based work, there will likely be a studio at least once, if not several times while you're here, that you can take that studio and actually combine work in the community with your studio work.
Yeah, so in terms of the Flourishing Communities Collaborative, the ambition for that is that there will be a Flourishing Communities studio every year. And so we start to see like how we might be able to operate as both kind of 3-credit, but then also architectural design studios. And so it gets embedded in there.
But I also think as a student coming in, you are a stakeholder in the School of Architecture.
Yep.
And so when you begin to think about it as something that I can bring to the table, as opposed to something that needs to be there for me to receive,
right,
it's a completely different conversation, right? And so I think if you see an opportunity, bring it to the table, and the leadership will figure out how to incorporate it in a studio,
yep,
or there's so many opportunities.
That's part of the Student Advisory Council, which actually all 3 of these have served on them. So that's part of some of the things that we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, that maintaining that kind of connectivity with the students. And these are things that we like to hear about.
Yep.
And helps us.
So there's one more question, then I think we're going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So this will be the last question.
For the application, what test scores are you looking for? What undergraduate GPA are you looking for? I'll take this one. As I said earlier, the group the groups that review the applications are very good at looking at the whole package. And they do understand that, you know, when you were a freshman in college, you may have had issues with, let's say, calculus or a particular course that may have taken your GPA down a little bit. They realize life happens to students, and they realize that everybody is not going to apply here with a 4.0 GPA and 160s or better on the GRE. Don't get too hung up on if your GPA is not a 4.0, but your GRE scores may be better, your portfolio may be stellar, and that may outweigh both of those. So we don't actually publish a required GRE score, and we don't publish a required GPA for that reason. They also have to take into consideration that not every student takes the same courses. Not every student comes from a school that has the rigor of another school. So there are a lot of things that play into it. So don't let one factor in the application take you down. Don't let one thing knock you out of applying.
Yeah.
You will likely be fine, and they're excellent at looking at the whole package.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap up. We just, on behalf of everybody here, we want to thank you guys for joining. And if you have any more questions, you know, just look on the webpage, and if you can't find it there, just reach out to us. And we definitely look forward to your applications, and hopefully to see you next fall. So
Thanks.
Thank you.